Think medieval folks were all about purity, prayer, and keeping things chaste? Think again. If you imagine them spending their lives in quiet devotion, avoiding anything remotely sinful, you're in for a serious reality check. Get ready, because what you're about to uncover about medieval sexuality is outrageous, twisted, and so over the top, it makes today's hookup culture look tame. We're diving headfirst into a world of bizarre bedroom rituals that make 50 Shades of Grey seem like a fairy tale. From love potions made with animal parts to courtroom performances where men had to prove they couldn't perform, this is the kind of wild history lesson they definitely didn't teach in school. Spoiler: the Middle Ages weren't dark because people were prudish. They were dark because of the things people were actually doing behind closed doors. Let's kick things off with one of the strangest dating customs ever invented: bundling. Imagine this. You're a young guy in medieval times, your parents have lined up a potential bride, and you're probably thinking, cool, time for a romantic evening? Nope. Time to get zipped into a sack and shoved into bed with someone you've never even had a proper conversation with. Bundling was basically the medieval version of a supervised sleepover. But instead of having a chaperone in the room, you'd be sewn or wrapped into a bed setup where your movements were restricted, sometimes with a literal wooden board placed between you and your date. Nothing screams chemistry like a big hunk of timber between you and your maybe future wife. But here's the kicker: this wasn't just allowed by parents. It was encouraged. Families would invite suitors to stay the night wrapped up with their daughters like it was the safest, most logical way to bond. It's like someone took the idea of supervised dating and said, what if we added burlap sacks and body heat? This got so normalized that there were actual bundling bags produced for the occasion. Yes, an entire little industry existed for the sole purpose of keeping people from touching each other, while also requiring them to sleep in the same bed. And shocker, it didn't really stop anything. Records show that pregnancy rates among bundling couples were often higher than in more traditional courtships. Turns out, hormones don't care about planks of wood or tight sleeping bags. Religious leaders of the time were constantly ranting about how bundling was immoral, yet no one could stop it, especially in the countryside where it was deeply woven into local customs. It's basically the medieval version of trying to ban teenagers from using TikTok. Sounds like a good idea in theory, but good luck enforcing it. Medieval folks didn't just say, food is love. They went all in ways that'll make you question everything you know about romance and cuisine. We're not talking chocolates and strawberries here. We're talking about entire banquets crafted to light the bedroom fires, with ingredients so wild, today's health inspectors would probably faint. Let's start with the centerpiece of medieval sexy food: animal testicles. Yep, the prized delicacy of the day was the testicles of young bulls, rams, and boars. These were seen as the ultimate libido boosters, and since calling them balls was apparently too crude for polite society, they referred to them as stones. Classy, right? These stones were prepared every way imaginable: roasted, stewed, fried, ground into powder, or even stirred into wine. If there was a way to serve up testicles, medieval chefs had it covered. And that's not even the weirdest part. People also ate sparrow brains, yes, the tiny bird, because they believed it boosted sexual stamina. And they didn't stop there. Reproductive organs from all kinds of animals made it onto the table, thanks to the belief that eating fertility would lead to fertility. Think of it as a bizarre form of culinary voodoo with way more organ meat. Even spices weren't safe. Black pepper, ginger, cinnamon, saffron, all considered natural aphrodisiacs. That's part of why they were worth a fortune. People weren't just seasoning their food, they were spicing up their sex lives. It's medieval Viagra in powder form. And if you were wealthy, you'd throw what they called a love feast. A full-on, multi-course meal crafted entirely to get people in the mood. The wildest part? These feasts were often served at wedding receptions. Imagine showing up to your friend's wedding and getting served 7 courses of animal organs and bird brains, all in the name of making sure the couple had a great wedding night. Even the cake wasn't safe. Traditional medieval wedding cakes were loaded with pine nuts, almonds, and honey, not just for flavor, but because each was thought to fire up the libido. Medieval doctors actually wrote entire manuals on this stuff, real medical texts with recipe instructions and guides to sexual enhancement through food. We've still got the manuscripts today with titles like On the Generation of Semen and Foods That Arouse Lust. They weren't considered taboo or shady either. These were studied by serious scholars. The obsession got so intense that some ingredients were banned during fasting periods, not for being unhealthy, but because they were considered too exciting for people trying to be spiritually focused. Think meeting your partner's parents is uncomfortable? Now imagine having an entire room full of nobles watch you lose your virginity. Welcome to the world of the medieval bedding ceremony, where privacy wasn't just optional, it was practically illegal if you were part of the aristocracy. Why, you ask? Simple, in that wonderfully twisted medieval logic, a marriage wasn't considered legit until it was physically consummated. And since these marriages often involved serious deals, land, wealth, and power changing hands, people wanted proof that the union had been, well, sealed. Because apparently, nothing says ironclad legal agreement like a group of lords and bishops standing around your bed while you get busy. Here's how this deeply uncomfortable ritual played out. After the official wedding ceremony, the bride and groom didn't just wander off to their honeymoon suite. No, they were paraded to the bedroom by a crowd of guests. Once there, gender roles took center stage. Female relatives helped undress the bride. Male relatives handled the groom, because what's a medieval wedding night without a fully gender-segregated strip show? Then came the grand finale. The newlyweds were tucked into bed together while actual people, we're talking clergy, nobility, and extended family, stood around and observed. And no, this wasn't a quick check-in. Some guests stuck around the entire time, sometimes even offering tips or moral support, which is a level of awkward no amount of therapy could fix. Oh, and it gets weirder. After the deed was done, the couple had to present the sheets, yes, actual bed sheets, as evidence. Bloodstains were inspected to confirm the bride's virginity and that penetration had occurred. It was like submitting your honeymoon linens as legal documents. Romantic, right? And don't think this bizarre tradition was just for royalty. If your marriage involved anything valuable, land, alliances, family status, you could be subject to the same voyeuristic nightmare. Thousands of couples had to go through this surreal ritual. Some tried to cheat the system, keeping witnesses outside the door. But that didn't always fly. There are court records of annulments because the consummation wasn't witnessed properly, meaning the couple had to redo it, this time with an approved audience. Nightmare fuel. The whole thing was so normalized that they even had etiquette manuals for it. No joke. Guides with step-by-step instructions on what the witnesses should say, where to stand, and how long to stay. Medieval society turned voyeurism into a ceremonial obligation. If you thought aristocratic romance in the Middle Ages was all moonlight and passion, think again. For the medieval upper class, sex wasn't spontaneous, it was strategic. Picture it more like a company board meeting than a night of romance, complete with star charts, medical advice, and religious vetoes. Getting pregnant wasn't just biology, it was a full-blown operation. First came the astrology. Medieval couples didn't just pick a night, they consulted planetary alignments like they were launching a satellite, not making a baby. The stars had to be in just the right position. The waxing moon was key. Oh, and the woman's body needed to be in a perfect hot and moist balance. Part of the four humors theory that was basically medieval pseudoscience with extra steps. But that was just the beginning. Some guides claimed certain saints' feast days were ideal for baby making, as if your future child would be extra blessed if conceived on Saint whoever's special day. So now, couples weren't just checking the moon. They were juggling 3 calendars, trying to avoid a cosmic scheduling conflict. The specifics were wild. Midnight was the preferred time. The weather? Ideally warm and damp. And don't forget to angle your bed facing east, because apparently conception works better if you're aligned with the sunrise. Honestly, it was easier to plan a medieval war than to plan a pregnancy. Now, if you're wondering whether medieval people had any grasp of biology, well, let's talk about gender selection. If you wanted a boy, the man was advised to tie off his left testicle during sex, because yes, they actually believed boys came from the right one and girls from the left. The anatomical accuracy of a drunk fortune cookie. And then came the church, ready to throw in an extra 500 restrictions. No sex on Sundays, or Wednesdays, or Fridays. Definitely not during Lent or Advent. Not during menstruation. Not while pregnant. Not while breastfeeding. All told, there were over 180 days a year when sex was religiously banned. Imagine needing a divine permission slip just to get frisky. Wealthy couples, desperate for heirs, went all in. They hired fertility consultants, part astrologer, part priest, part doctor, to create custom conception calendars. These guys analyzed birth charts, family health records, and the liturgical calendar to figure out the perfect baby-making window. It was like using a medieval version of a fertility app, only with zero science and way more incense. The pressure was so intense that some couples even traveled across the country to be in the right place when the stars aligned. Because apparently even geography was thought to affect conception. If the moon was full, the planets were happy, and the weather was nice, better pack your bags and head to that lucky hilltop monastery. In the Middle Ages, underwear wasn't just about modesty, it was mysticism with a waistband. Forget Victoria's Secret, medieval folks were strapping on undergarments blessed by priests, lined with holy text, and packed with powdered unicorn horn. Spoiler, it was actually narwhal tusk. Let's start with the Girdle of Venus. Sounds romantic, right? In reality, it was a belt, often linen or silk, tied around the hips and covered in prayers, star charts, and magical spells. This wasn't fashion, it was a fertility device. Supposedly, it boosted your chances of getting pregnant, ensured a smooth delivery, and even cranked up bedroom performance. Because nothing screams passion like belting up with scripture and astrology before getting down to business. And these belts? Just the beginning. Women also wore charm-filled amulets, loaded with all kinds of bizarre ingredients. Crushed gemstones, exotic powders, even slivers of unicorn horn. Each one promised a little magical boost to the reproductive system. Some even contained handwritten prayers, as if God was running a medieval wishlist hotline. But the crown jewel of weird, the conception stone. Yep, women were told to place a special stone or crystal inside their undergarments during intercourse to encourage pregnancy. Different stones meant different baby outcomes. Emerald for boys, sapphire for girls, and diamonds for twins. Imagine believing family planning was just a matter of picking the right bling. Of course, men got their own magical gear too. Rings worn on fertility fingers, amulets filled with dried animal parts, yes, including testicles, because medieval men had a real thing for balls, and even holy loincloths blessed to improve performance. If you were lucky, your undies came with divine customer support. Naturally, the church saw an opportunity. Priests were more than happy to bless your belts, charms, sheets, whatever you needed, for a fee, of course. It was like a religious subscription box for your sex life. Some of these accessories were so complex, they came with full instruction guides, including when to wear them, what to say while putting them on, and what to do if they stopped working. Medieval tech support, but for enchanted underwear. The rich got the high-end stuff. Imported silk, gold embroidery, gemstone clasps. The poor made do with rougher, DIY versions using local herbs and whatever cloth they had. It wasn't just about sex or children. Your magical underwear literally showed your social status. In fact, belief in these fertility charms ran so deep that some people flat out refused sex unless the proper accessories were worn. For medieval folks, gearing up for intimacy meant more than lighting a candle. It meant suiting up in blessed, bewitched, and embroidered battle armor. Think divorce court today is awkward? Imagine being forced to prove your sexual performance in front of a live audience, complete with judges, doctors, and nosy onlookers. Welcome to the bizarre world of medieval impotence trials, where love died in public and your dignity didn't stand a chance. In a time when the Catholic Church treated divorce like heresy, alleging impotence was one of the rare escape routes out of a miserable marriage. But you couldn't just say your husband couldn't perform. Oh no, you had to legally prove it, with evidence, and witnesses, and sometimes a live demonstration. First came the medical exams. The couple would be separately inspected by physicians, who checked for any anatomical defects. Then came the Inquisition, not the burning kind, but still awful. Both parties were grilled under oath about their sex life. How often, how long, what worked, what didn't, and whether anyone cried afterward. If that didn't settle it, the court could escalate things with something that sounds fake but wasn't: the trial by Congress. And no, not the legislative kind, this was a literal sex test. If medical evidence was inconclusive, the couple was ordered to have intercourse in a designated room, while court officials and doctors watched discreetly through peepholes, curtains, or hidden panels. It wasn't a one-and-done situation either. Some couples had to repeat the act multiple times, over weeks or even months. as the court tried to determine whether the man was truly unable to perform. If he failed, the marriage could be annulled. If he succeeded, back to married life you went, with everyone in town now knowing intimate details about your anatomy. Naturally, men tried to rig the system. They snuck in aphrodisiacs, medieval performance enhancers, made from herbs, animal organs, and occasionally questionable potions. Some were caught red-handed or red-groined, leading to even more humiliating strip searches before trials to ensure there was no cheating below the belt. Women didn't get a free pass either. If you claimed your husband couldn't perform, you had to prove that you were perfectly desirable and sexually functional. That meant intimate physical exams and invasive questions about arousal, sensation, and sexual enthusiasm, because clearly if the guy couldn't perform, it might be your fault for not being hot enough. And forget privacy. These trials were the medieval version of public scandal. Whether you won or lost, your bedroom business was now common gossip, and your reputation was toast. Some men chose to quietly accept an annulment rather than endure the full humiliation, basically admitting impotence just to avoid the peep show court date. In the end, medieval impotence trials were less about love or justice, and more about turning private dysfunction into a very public circus, all under the holy banner of church-approved marriage. Here's a historical curveball you probably didn't see coming. The medieval church wasn't just turning a blind eye to prostitution, it was actively running one of Europe's most organized and profitable sex industries. That's right. While preaching sermons about purity, chastity, and the evils of the flesh, church leaders were also quietly pocketing profits from brothels. It's like if a modern-day anti-porn politician secretly owned half the adult film industry. Let's zoom in on 12th century London, specifically the notorious red light district of Southwark. This area, just outside the city walls, was home to 18 licensed brothels employing more than 1,000 sex workers. And who was the proud landlord of this booming business? The Bishop of Winchester. These brothels were literally called the Stews of Winchester. That's not slang, that's historical record. Church officials didn't even try to hide it. They framed prostitution as a necessary evil, claiming that allowing regulated sex work helped prevent greater sins like adultery, sodomy, and rape. So rather than ban it, they chose to monetize it, building a system that was morally bankrupt but financially brilliant. Here's how it worked. Since canon law forbade clergy from directly running brothels, bishops simply owned the land and leased it to brothel operators, collecting rent and taxes while pretending they had no idea what was going on. It was a divine loophole. They weren't running the brothels, they were just profiting from them. The system was highly structured. Sex workers had to wear specific clothing, follow work schedules, and live in regulated zones. They couldn't operate on religious holidays, couldn't reject clients without a valid excuse, and were subject to routine medical exams. Not for their own protection, of course, but to keep the profits flowing uninterrupted. And where did all this money go? That's the kicker. The church used brothel revenue to fund cathedrals, monasteries, and religious feasts. Yep, the same people condemning lust from the pulpit were financing the construction of churches with money earned through sex work. Holiness built on horniness, that's the medieval way. This wasn't a fringe phenomenon. The system lasted for centuries, woven so deeply into the fabric of medieval society that attempts to shut it down were met with fierce resistance. Reformers were told to back off, not for moral reasons, but because too many powerful people were making too much money. It wasn't until the Protestant Reformation and a broader cultural shift that the hypocrisy became too obvious to ignore. Public opinion turned, and the church gradually had to back away from the brothel business. But make no mistake, for hundreds of years, the institution that claimed to guard souls was running a sex trade operation so vast, it would make modern cartels jealous. Think modern birth control has its flaws? Welcome to the medieval era, where contraception was less science and more chaotic witchcraft with a dash of accidental suicide. If medieval people had an official slogan for birth control, it would have been, "Try anything once," especially if it involves animal genitals. Let's start with their favorite accessory, weasel testicles. Yes, really. Women would wear little sacks of dried weasel nuts around their necks to ward off pregnancy, because someone decided that since weasels were sexually active but didn't have big litters, their junk must hold the key to fertility control. The logic is questionable. The commitment is undeniable. But animal parts weren't just for necklaces. There were also birth control potions that read more like medieval torture recipes. crushed beaver testicles mixed with wine, powdered iron in water, and even liquid mercury. That's right, actual mercury, which, spoiler alert, is very toxic. These cures may not have prevented pregnancy, but they sure killed off the person trying to use them. Problem solved. Then came the sneezing method.